Karl Marx and him are writing, back and forth. And he says that there can be no doubt that Negroes and mulattoes constitute a lower race.
Wow.
So stick that in your diversity pattern.
There you go. We're talking today with the great doctor, Michael Jones. Yes, the doctor is in. The the underground professor. Not to be confused with the unpleasant blind guy who's in the chat role at theexceptionalconservativeshow.com listening to tonight's show. And we're talking about Karl Marx's weapons of political warfare, the press, the pulpit, and the comic papers. We've been discussing the collaboration of W.E.B. Du Bois and Karl Marx. And I want to broach with you, firstly, Karl Marx identifying the press as one of the better tools to use to spread his philosophies. And I just want to find, why the press, sir? Why would you use journalists to take advantage of them with a philosophy that garners no great success?
Well, that's because most of the people in the press are useful idiots. I mean, seriously, they're lazy. They do not do the research because it doesn't take much research to find out these things that we talk about.
Yeah.
And find out the truth and what works, what doesn't. And they have an agenda. They're there trying to save the world for the betterment of mankind, and because they know how to do it, or because they believe that they are superior to the rest of us and therefore can tell us how to live our lives, that's who goes into journalism. People who primarily think they can tell the rest of us how we're doing it wrong and what we should be doing and how we should do it right. But they're also basically lazy people. The kind of people who go through school believing that their self-esteem is more important than the knowledge that they can learn from a book. And so Karl Marx, this is something that many people, Obama did this, Hitler did this, Roosevelt did this. They used the media to carry their water. And the media will happily go out and do that. I'll give you even a more local example.
Okay.
Look at what's happening between Donald Trump and that blonde chick from Fox.
You mean the bimbo? The bimbo?
Yes.
Megan.
Now, I wouldn't kick her out of bed, but yeah.
Yeah, of course. There you go. Megyn Kelly.
Right, that one. But she's that right there. Trump is using the media like he's playing a Stradivarius violin. He's sitting there strumming it along. And this whole thing over Fox and will he be at the debate or not? That started about 28 minutes ago. The debate, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk a little bit about that on our Sunday show here. But the idea that he's not manipulating the press over this and using them to get his message out because he's gotten a lot of press coverage over it.
No, well, it's been almost 200 years since Karl Marx. Have we not learned? Have we not learned that journalists are about themselves and about their interests and present a picture of the world through their rose-colored glasses?
Well, sure. I think we all know that, generally speaking. But where else are you going to turn for information? You and I are the same. Mm-hmm. What part of media? Now, we're the new media. We're the primary source of information for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we bring our own baggage with that and our own, predictions, things that we find are important. We massage the news just like they do. What we choose to cover and what we ignore, and mostly what we do is we spend a lot of time deciding what not to cover because there's just so much to talk about. You've got to minimize the conversational topics because we only have so much time to do these things.
Exactly.
So we do it too. But the difference, I think, is that we try to be upfront about it. You know, we come and say, look, this is who we are. We're not pretending to be objective, disinterested purveyors of what's going on around us, you know. And a journalist is somebody who's just supposed to go and witness and report
Yes.
what's going on. And we don't get that in media. In fact, if you open up a newspaper, if you still have one of those old-fashioned pieces of paper in your hand, then the opinion section starts on 1A, and then somewhere in the middle of the classified section. So, you know, everything from the comic strips to the deceased page. You know, the page that tells everybody who's died. And that kind of freaks me out too. Have you ever noticed when you read that everybody dies in alphabetical order?
Amazingly, I was hoping that my last name would be like Z.
I'm a J and you're an M, so you know I probably don't have enough time on Earth.
Exactly, you'll go before me. Now he also mentioned the Pulpit, and W.E.B. Du Bois spent a lot of time with Margaret Sanger, and they served on the same board, Planned Parenthood board, back in 1942. And he was a big time population controlist. She was a big time population controlist. And each of them effectually chose the pulpit as the place in which they would significantly impact or influence. She, by recruiting through community action, he, by teaching scholars at the university level. I wanted you to talk about the two differences in terms of those approaches and how they dramatically impact the pulpit of today for ministers who are preaching the same things that Sanger and Du Bois preached many years ago.
I'm not sure what you're asking. The difference between what now?
Why? See,
you know, they push population control, right? As if we're overpopulated on the planet.
Yeah.
And I've never understood that. I mean, there's a group out there called Zero Population, and if you go and read all their crap from 10 and 20 years ago, because they started big time in the 50s and 60s, their whole idea was that the world cannot feed all these people, and that there'll be mass starvation, and so we need to cut back. And that's why they push abortion and birth control and other things. And of course, that's simply not true. And here, this is the ironic thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of out of context what we're talking about, but all of these zero population growth people are Democrats or worse. And they're also the very people that are claiming we need more immigrants to come from other countries because we don't have enough people to do the jobs that we need. While at the same time, we have a record number of people that are unemployed in our country and living off of the government checks because they can't or won't work. And so what are we doing? We're having to bring in labor from other countries, more human beings into America to do the work that all these other people won't do. And yet, the zero population people are still running around screaming that we need to stop population growth in America. While at the same time, they're screaming that we need to improve and increase immigration into America.
Yeah.
And the Democrat Party is running around complaining that they've aborted most of their new Democrats because most of the people who get abortions are Democrats. And so that's why they need to have all these Hispanics and Muslims coming over the border because they've killed all their potential voters in the womb. And they need fresh blood that way because they're not growing as a community. And so this whole population growth thing really pisses me off, to tell you the truth. But the Sanger and well, I'm not so sure about Du Bois at this point, but Sanger, she wasn't for population restriction. she was for certain people not to breed.
There you go.
She didn't think that minorities should breed or white trash. But, you know, if you were a wealthy American, then you should have all the kids you want, you know, because you're a productive member of society, and your kids will probably be productive members of society. But she wasn't keen on white trash or blacks or Indians or Mexicans procreating. And one of the ways they went to go and attack that was because they didn't think it would ever pass, because people like their children, right? They want them. They want to pass on their genes and stuff. It's something that God put into us that we want to do.
Yes.
So she went to the preacher class of blacks, which is, I think, every third black person is a preacher.
Yeah.
And so she went to attack them and said,
that was racist, sir. That was racist, sir.
Thank you. I was going for that. I mean, I went in there to visit you, and I was in your church, and I said, "Who's the preacher?" And everybody stood up. So I fit right in there.
Yeah, exactly.
But they went to these preachers and said, "Hey, we can give you a little bit of power in your community and some money and prestige, and here's what we want you to talk about." And so they went, "Oh, okay," and they did. And so they started promoting the line that Planned Parenthood gave them to say, and we still got that today. I mean, for instance, in Texas, you know, I can't remember if it was you or somebody else was talking about the other day about the people that made those videos of Planned Parenthood and their body shopping and Lamborghini run, right?
Yeah.
And we have an attorney general here that took to a petite court. I can't think of the name. Grand jury. Took to grand jury that, and in the middle of it, the grand jury decided to no bill Planned Parenthood, but prosecute the filmmakers.
Yes.
And so the whistleblowers are going to be prosecuted over exposing the criminality of Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood is going to be getting off scot-free. A purely political decision by this attorney general, and who is a Democrat,
yes,
lifelong. But everything you're hearing about it is just exactly what you would expect them to be saying. The bumper sticker speeches that we have been treated to for so long, and the ones that don't pass inspection beyond a prima facie blush. And that's what we have a problem with in this country, is too many people think that they're educated and informed because they can recite a few bumper stickers. and this is why we're in trouble. But that's what Sanger capitalized on. That's what Webby Du Bois capitalized on. And the Democrat Party is big on that. And the establishment Republicans are big on that, for that matter.
Exactly.
But if you're not going to do the research, you know, and that's the thing. These things can be blown up and exposed and shown to be wrong, and they will refuse to accept the data because it's not what they want to believe. It's not what they, you know, it's not the easy thing to believe in. And if they stop believing it, then they are afraid that their lifestyle, or, you know, their welfare checks, or their their subsidies from these organizations, from Soros or Planned Parenthood or wherever, that's going into the churches or whatnot. Because can you imagine if you are a preacher and you are a Christian preacher, right? What is your job description? What are you supposed to be doing? You're supposed to be teaching the Word of God.
Yep.
The Word of God is Jesus. That's what the Word of God is, because that's what Jesus' name was before we called him Jesus, at least down here in Texas.
Exactly.
And but he's, in the Bible, he is referred to as the Word of God. If you're a preacher, you are to speak the Word of God, meaning you are to repeat what Christ said and did, and to teach your lambs, your followers, about this, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, not so much. How can you preach about life and what Jesus said and reconcile that with murdering souls in women's rooms.
There you go.
You cannot. Yeah, you cannot. And so that's why I say that I am very afraid that most black people will not go to heaven, that they're not going to be saved because they are following preachers that are corrupters, preachers that are the tool of the devil instead of a representative of Christ on earth.
Exactly.
And that doesn't mean that a lot of white people aren't going to follow right behind them.
Exactly. But you're not saying.
But I'm saying as a community at large, yeah.
Yeah, but you're not saying anything different than there was a pastor in Harlem who said the very same thing, and that they are following a cult of personality and ideology, but they're not following the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Exactly.
You know,
and that's what's happening.
Yeah, and so
that's what people, Du Bois and those guys, they started doing this stuff. And this is what I think killed Malcolm X. And I could be speaking out of turn, but I think when Malcolm X had his epiphany,
yep,
they got him killed. Martin Luther King was going to lead people down the primrose path of doing things for yourself and not looking to government and the Democrats to do things for you. And so that got him killed. And that's a shame because if you go back and look at the Civil War, there were plenty of free black men, and they were literate and articulate, but they should have been the examples of where to go in the black community for how to become an American. Sadly, the Democrat Party ostracized them, belittled them, berated them, and did everything in their power to pass rules, laws, and regulations to prevent them from being first-class citizens in our country. And they did it for no other reason, Ken. The Democrat Party did this for no other reason than because they had very little self-esteem themselves. And they had to find somebody, like my ex-wife. She always felt better if she could tear somebody else down. This is what the Democrat Party is all about, was making stupid white people feel superior. And so they went after black people. They created the KKK.
Yep.
And, I'm wearing a shirt right now that has the flag from Robert E. Lee on it. And below it, it says, "Because you said I can't." And so you would not believe the amount of people that were on Periscope tonight attacking that shirt. And they would say things, "Oh God, the Confederate flag," and it blew my mind that they could be so ignorantly blissful on history and what it really stood for, and what it's about, and that bothers me. And it's the only Confederate flag I own too, by the way. So I put on that shirt, and it truly is the only reason I wear it is because everybody's running around saying I can't.
Yeah.
Now, if they had a legitimate reason, I might listen to it.
Exactly.
But you can't tell me it's because it's one of racism. It wasn't the Confederate flag. It was a battle flag flown by General Lee.
Exactly.
Right. And General Lee was asked by Abraham Lincoln to lead his armies, the Army of the Potomac. And Lee turned him down and said, "Sadly, sir, I see myself as a Virginian first." And so he had to go to that. It was his duty as he saw it. He was a very honorable man. Both sides of the Civil War highly respected Robert E. Lee. And so, there's a lot of history there. But
exactly. And Robert E. Lee is noted to be one of the greatest generals, along with Patton and Eisenhower.
Yes.
He is looked upon they look upon him as tutor. He was that superior in terms of military strategy and exemplary service.
Lincoln kept trying to find generals that would go against Lee.
Exactly.
They were all afraid of him. And so this man had, barefoot soldiers that were hillbillies, and very few of them in comparison to the Potomac Army, right?
Yeah.
And yet they couldn't beat him in battles because of his superior knowledge and generalship. And I mean, if that we're at the disposal of doing, the Civil War wouldn't have lasted a year.
Exactly.
The fact that it took 4 years is because of the brilliance of Robert E. Lee. And the North knew this. That's why Lincoln went through so many generals. He's like, well, you find me a general that will go after it. And finally, Stonewall Jackson was the man that did this.
Exactly.
But you know, not only that, Lee's history. I mean, his grandfather is the man who went from Virginia to the Continental Congress with the Declaration of Independence. Now, not the one Thomas Jefferson wrote, but the actual declaration that we want to formally declare our independence from Britain. That was Robert E. Lee's grandfather. This man is steeped in our history, and family-wise, about gaining freedoms and whatnot. And so you know, to ignore that. But I mean, look, the American flag, if you're going to trash the Confederate flag or any of the Confederacy flags, okay, fine. But then why aren't you against the U.S. flag?
Yeah.
Well, because they stopped slavery. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
What?
Or against
also endured slavery for 150 years.
Or against the flag of the red, green, and black flag that individuals like to run around the world with in terms of African power.
Right.
You know, you should be against that. That's racist and that's nationalistic.
Sure.
You know.
Well, who do you think gave us the slaves in the first place? It was Africans.
Exactly. It was Muslims. It was Muslims that sold us into slavery. Yeah.
There's no country that doesn't have racism and or slavery in their, not racism, but slavery in their history. Every race on this planet has been a slave at some time in history. And it's just unfortunately that in America we made it one about race.
Yeah.
And then that would have been okay after we decided it. But we're the only country that went to blows against itself in a civil war to end it. No other country did that. And there's still slavery going on in the Africas today.
Yeah.
You know, the Sudan's riddled with it. And so, you know, that's the thing I was saying earlier. It's just so many people have the depth of knowledge of a bumper sticker mentality. And they think they're informed. And it's very, very hard to talk with them. Karl Marx said this. He said, religion is the impotence of the human mind to deal with occurrences it cannot understand. Okay, now I get what he's trying to say there, you know, that we blame the supernatural for things that we can't figure out.
Yeah.
But let me suggest to you a corollary to that. And that is that progressivism is the tool the human mind uses to deal with the impotency of understanding the world around.
Wow. Dr. Michael Jones, the underground professor. You are listening to New Day, Black and Red on WNJC 1360 AM out of the city of brotherly love, better known as Philadelphia, PA, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, and around the world on Conservative Commandos Radio Network, also SHR Media, and Rebooting Liberty and High Plains Talk Radio. Professor, one last fiat. We've talked about the pulpit, which literally is responsible. I'll say this. 40% of the 55 million abortions since 1973 happen to be black babies.
Yeah, that's just a random thing.
Yeah. It doesn't happen every day. And it is many in the black liberation theology who are responsible for that happening because they refuse to stand up against it. They're receiving honorarium and support from those of the left who support population control via the extinction and genocide of blacks. And so literally allowing us to kill our own, which is another reason why we should be concerned about crime. But Karl Marx also spoke about this one last thing, and I think it's kind of funny, but comic papers. which in his particular day would be the satires that we would see on the New Yorker, or the kind of stuff that we would see in the editorial pages of the Washington Post or the LA Times. Why, sir, are those pictures so important, those satires so important to spreading the good news of Marxism?
Well, not just Marxism, anything. Political cartoons make you think. They're very concise. They're quick panels, and it fits the template of people who don't have time to do research or to think for themselves or to go sit down and read 5 or 6 books on the subject, and then come up with a decision. You can glance at a cartoon strip, a panel or 3 or 4 panels, and you're done. And so you can convey an entire thought process in one of these things, and you can do it only at a superficial level. But see, most of us, we don't take the time, the effort. It takes a lot of self-discipline to study and do research and whatnot, and it takes away from all the other things that are pulling at us to do. But a political cartoon can give you a superficial reasoning on a prima facie basis on almost any subject, be it communism, Marxism, racism, conservatism, and so you see it, and it lodges an impression in your mind, and it builds the body of your knowledge to the point where it helps sway you on things, and mostly what it does is it will not change you, but it will either confirm what you believe or be discarded. And so if you see it, you think, oh, that's nonsense, you move on, nothing ever happens. But if it agrees with whatever you believe, then it helps build the body of your belief to the point where it strengthens it. But it hasn't really done so out of strength. It does so like a Band-Aid.
Yeah. And you're saying it right. And Dave Milner brings up the point in the chat roll about the Daily Show with John. I forget his last name. No, the other good John. No, I can't think of the guy's name now. Tell me, who is the Daily Show, Dave? Who is the Daily Show?
Steve Colbert.
Jon Stewart. Thank you. The award goes to Mrs. Biggs. Mrs. Biggs came up with that one. Jon Stewart, the other good Jew. So, but I put in the chat roll the satire for the day out of the New Yorker. Now, I don't want people thinking that I opened the New Yorker first thing in the morning in order to read and ferret the news of the day. I am not that kind of guy. Am I, Professor?
No. Thank you. I would never categorize you as being an academic.
Thank you, sir. But in the New Yorker today, there is a picture of a gentleman who's sitting in his chair, reclining, looking at the news on his flat screen TV, and it says beneath, Fox News just announced that Clint Eastwood will be on stage at tonight's debate to address an empty podium. Now, that's not very funny. That's not funny at all. But
I thought that was Obama's party. Well, at least that's better than what's happening at the City Council of Phoenix, Arizona. They're having a Satanic group member come up to give the prayer at the next City Council meeting.
Wow. Wow.
Under the guise of religious freedom.
Speaking. Wow.
We're in trouble, Kim.
We are in trouble. We are in trouble, especially when it was John Boehner who, for the first time, allowed someone to pray from the Quran. We're in trouble. We're in trouble as a nation on the House floor.
The funny thing is I don't get this is something that I think is unique to black people in America anyway. We don't have white leaders in the white world.
Thank you.
Most of us don't most of us don't even think of ourselves until someone wants to point out we have white privilege or something. Most of us don't even think about ourselves as being white or not white. And that's not to say there's not racist, but I mean, when you think of yourself, we don't think of ourselves as skin color first, and we don't unite because you've got those few hillbilly cracker white power people, but most of them are in danger of expired brain cells.
Yeah.
But there's such a minor faction. But the black community as a whole sees themselves as the black community. They have black leaders. They look to certain blacks to tell them how to do things. Instead of looking at the classics, instead of going and finding out the great literature of the past, Shakespeare and Socrates, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
They look for other people to translate the Bible for them, and it's in English.
Yeah.
And yet they go to people who have black liberation theology, and there's nothing in the Bible that speaks of a theology of being saved as a group. It's all about individual salvation. And yet they are twisting the words. They're going to people to do that. And I guess it's because I'm white. I never really thought my skin color would affect me in any way, shape, or form of who I am as a person.
Yeah.
But I can't wrap my brain around the skin.
Well, we have to thank the Catholic. We have to thank the Catholic Church, and you all are listening to a very substantive conversation regarding Karl Marx and his weapons of political warfare, dealing with the media, the pulpit, and the comic papers or satire papers of his particular day. And we're talking about, in a sense, racism, but Black liberation theology is a offshoot of liberation theology that came from the Catholic Church dating back to the mid-1800s. And it was amongst the dictators of South America that they learned that they could not spread the good news of Jesus Christ, but they could alter the scriptures or the presentation of the scriptures to be amenable to those who were in power. And so you have those individuals who are attempting to bend the Gospels and force individuals to see it in an interpretation based on eisegete and not on exegete, based on taking certain scriptures out of context to meet a philosophical ideal without actually rendering it to the common piece of the gospel itself. But I want to take a few moments here as we're going into our second hour of New Day Black and Red. And I want to thank my benevolent dictator, Rick Trader, for allowing us to go 2 hours on the network with our program now. And we have with us the underground professor, Dr. Michael Jones. And I'm his sidekick, Rusty. And
what you talking about 2 hours, Wills?
I know you got to go, but I just want to go with the scriptures at this particular point, and then I'm going to pick up on the second half hour. Racism in the scriptures. I want to take a look at 11 scriptures so that you understand racism in the eyes of God. God does not see the color of your skin. He sees the content of your character, first and foremost. So I want you to take a look at Proverbs 22:2. Proverbs 22:2. And I'll put that in the chat room for everybody who's following along at home. But Proverbs 22:2 reads, "The rich and the poor have a common bond. The Lord is the maker of them all." So, in the scriptures itself, God is not deterring his judgments, his thoughts, his grace, his mercy to any one person because of their wealth or because of their poverty. He is the creator of us all. And then we take a look at the scriptures again in Proverbs 24:23. And it says, these are the sayings of the wise. To show partiality in judgment is not good. When there is someone in the pulpit preaching that we should hate someone because of the color of their skin, or because of the color of their skin, they have a privilege or a special likening from God that we don't have, that is entirely an abomination before the Lord. Clearly, scriptures state that if we're not supposed to show partiality in judgment, certainly God wouldn't show a partiality in judgment. Then we take a look at Proverbs 29:13. Proverbs 29:13. And it reads, the poor man and the oppressor have this in common. The Lord gives light to the eyes of both. Now, many people say that because slavery exists, God approved of it. Well, because I lost my virginity does not mean that God approved of it. Okay?
Well, God put into the Bible a lot of restrictions about slavery. If you go and look, if you have two coats, you have to give your slave a coat. He made it so costly that if you were to have slaves, most people didn't because it was biblically too hard to do.
Yeah.
In the Jewish world anyway, the Old Testament times. They had servants, but they didn't have slaves for the most part because and then after 7 years you had to let them go.
Yeah.
It was hard to get your money out of them. And so the Bible, you had a lot of Southerners, preachers and stuff during the 1850s and 60s that preached that the Bible said that slavery was good and okay and therefore biblically supported. But the simple fact is that was a misconstruction of the passages in the Bible, and that a proper reading of it could be that anything but easy to have slaves, or that God wants you to have that. And He created us all equal.
Yeah.
That's what makes America so great, Ken. If we put that right there in the very front of our first organic document, all men are created equal. Sadly, we didn't follow through with that immediately, but look at the times, look at the practicalities of what was going on, the pragmatism of the time.
Yeah.
The very fact that we put a path that says this is what we're going to be one day.
But
no other country has done that in history.
But can we be honest here? It was not. It was okay. We'll be liars then. Forget you, Professor. Even at the origination of this country, slavery did not exist. Slavery was an inculcation of an individual who decided to take advantage of someone's need. And that person happened. Yeah. And that person happened to be a black person who started the first slave, or who created the first slave in America, in Virginia. So literally, it was a practice that was instituted in a society that was built strictly on free market capitalism, that you, the individual, have the right to create wealth, and you have the power to make wealth because Deuteronomy 8:18 says you do. And so, literally, those who condemn the Constitution for observing the practice that was already in place, although the Constitution squarely states that by 1808, slavery was supposed to end in America, period.
Yes.
And indentured service as well. Yeah. And what group violated that? The Democrats.
The party of the blacks.
Yeah.
The party of the little man.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
The party that cares.
The party that cares. That's a bumper sticker all in its own. Want to go very quickly to Romans 10, 12, and 13. You. Yes, sir. Have a very good night, sir.
I can stay if you want me to.
Oh, okay, cool.
Get rid of me.
No, not trying to.
But I heard something today that I don't know if it's true or not. But if it is, it says a lot about things like this. And that is, we look to our government for information and to help us, protect us, and whatnot, especially some segments of society. They really look to the government from the cradle to the grave to provide them everything they need.
Yeah.
Well, today, the government, the Congressional Budget Office, I think, or somebody, one of these came out and reassessed Obamacare signups, right?
Yeah.
People who have signed up for Obamacare, and they're reducing the reported number 40%.
Wow.
So that's 4 out of 10 people that the government came out and told us had signed up for it, and we got all that crap in the willing dupes of the media, the willing idiots there, that reported all this great news about how Obamacare is working and all these people are being lifted out of poverty because of Obamacare. No, 4 out of 10 were fake numbers. So
wow.
Removed. Yeah,
it's like setting up Twitter accounts for yourself, or Facebook pages,
Right, like on Hillary Clinton, where 1 out of, or what was it? They said 1.7 out of every 2 people on there were fake.
Yeah, exactly.
some ungodly number. They're all bought. But that's fake trends, fake information, fake knowledge. You see, the thing is the government reported that number, and the media ran with it without ever trying to find out if it was right or wrong. And that's the whole purpose of it, was to get everybody to think in their mind. And so now, even though they reported this correction, if you go out and you talk to people, they'll say, you don't know what you're talking about. This is done, 30 million people or whatever. And you're like, well, no, actually only about 12 million. It's not 30.
Exactly. And that's on a good day.
Actually less people insured today than were before Obamacare. But you can't get that through to them because they heard what they wanted to hear, that Obamacare is working and it's good. And so when you go to a church and you hear that abortions are okay because a woman has choice, or because, it will keep you from staying in poverty, or whatever the message is being preached, you don't hear the correction. And that's the problem, is we hear the good news that's false, and that makes us follow false prophets.
Yep.
And that's a very big danger in the Bible. The Jews constantly were being smited by the Philistines and others because of the following of false idols. And yet here we are today. The information is there. It's possible to have, and we will ignore it in favor of the false news because the false news makes us feel good.
I also want to add a piece to the Obamacare, because the truth of the matter is Obamacare is not for poor people only.
I can't afford it.
Well, guess what? There are some millionaires who have Obamacare. And Carolyn McClanahan, I'll put the story in the chat roll so that people will be able to read it for themselves. But there are millionaires who are being told to go get your millions. Go pick it up. The money is there. Under Obamacare, those who have net worths between $1 and $3 million are being told
they can get subsidized.
They can get subsidized. Those clients are saving between $4,600 to $8,800 in annual premium payments, and they receive subsidies. So literally,
you know why, right? This was done because of all the millionaires in Congress that needed the subsidies.
There you go. There you go. So literally, this is the biggest kickback windfall to taxpayers in the history of mankind. Well, maybe Social Security is that, but this certainly is up there.
No. Obama said that Obamacare will be the greatest redistribution of wealth that this country's ever seen. He said that.
Yep.
So we can't be surprised that it's actually doing it. But what everybody thought was that it would mean all the poor people would be getting money from all the rich people. And what they did not realize is that every time government has done something like this, what happens is the poor people get just enough money to make them starving for more and going to the government to get it. But usually what happens is the wealth gets redistributed from the middle class to the upper class.
Exactly.
Instead of down.
Exactly. And if you want to keep your millions, there are financial planners that will help you get into Obamacare. So I just want to let you know.
Well, that's it. I'm going to go get me a financial planner because I'm a thousandaire.
James chapter 2 verse 9 says, but if you show partiality, you're committing sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. Racism is not an acceptable vice in the eyes of God, and God is not one who shows that vice to the world. In fact, it is good advice not to show that vice or to have that vice at all. I want to take you...
Or Miami Vice.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Especially Miami Vice. Oh, that dropped like a dud. Anyway... anyway, I want to take you all this week on the Exceptional Conservative Show. We've been showing the connectivity between the fact that Democrats understood as early as the 1800s that to display ideology was more important than protecting life. That you could literally eradicate life and people would not have a problem with it because you were passionate about your ideology. And in fact, those on the opposite side would actually apologize to you for not sharing that same passion. We looked at the fact that there is a correlation between the KKK, the principles of Margaret Sanger, W.E.B. Du Bois, and tonight I want to introduce you to the connectivity that brought the radicalized political beliefs of the 1960s forward into urban America so that black preachers and black community activists could meld together and preach the same word 7 days a week the same way. That abortion was okay. Taking the Bible out of school was okay. Taking prayer out of school was okay. Voting for socialists was okay. I want to introduce you to a family planning special. I told you all last night that W.B. Du Bois, Mary Church Terrell, and many other famous blacks served on the Planned Parenthood Federation of America board of directors. Well, in 1966, in fact, May 5th, 1966, the Planned Parenthood Federation of America gave the Margaret Sanger Award to one of the most distinct men of our time. No, not just Lyndon Baines Johnson. They did give President Lyndon Baines Johnson the Planned Parenthood Federation Margaret Sanger Award that year. But, and it's amazing that 4 men that year won it. Dr. Carl Hartman, General Draper Jr., President Lyndon Baines Johnson. And the 4th brought the moral acuity that was necessary for Planned Parenthood to finally be accepted in urban America and make it part of its mainstream. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he received his award for his courageous resistance to bigotry and his lifelong dedication to the advancement of social justice and human dignity. And I want you to underline that word when you think of it, social justice. Social justice was brought to the fore by Stokely Carmichael and so many others. Dr. Martin Luther King was losing his bravado, per se. He was losing the interest of the urban people, the black people in America. They were looking for a more radical approach. Dr. King was able to present them that on May 5th, 1966. And in fact, I want to read to you the speech that was given by Coretta Scott King on that particular day. It is alleged to have been written by Dr. Martin Luther King, although his niece, Dr. Alveda King, says that it was written for Coretta Scott King. We can presume only that Dr. King prepared it for the reading of Miss Coretta Scott King. She begins by saying, before reading Dr. King's speech, Mrs. King declared, I'm proud tonight to say a word in behalf of your mentor and the person who symbolizes the idea of this organization, Margaret Sanger. Because of her dedication, her deep convictions, and for her suffering for what she believed in, I would like to say that I am proud to be a woman tonight. That is no different from Michelle Obama saying many years later that because President Obama, at the time a senator, was running for the president of the United States and looking as if he were to win, that for the first time she was proud to be an American. They are very similar in terms of consideration. Dr.
Sure. And the fact that her penis is bigger than Barack's.
Slightly, just slightly. There's been remeasurements. People are looking at it. Family planning, a special and urgent concern by the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Yes, Dr. King endorsed abortion. Just want to let y'all know that. Recently, the press has been filled with reports of sightings of flying saucers. While we need not give credence to these stories, they allow our imagination to speculate on how visitors from outer space would judge us. I'm afraid they would be stupefied at our conduct. They would observe that for death planning, we spend billions to create engines and strategies for war. They would also observe that we spend millions to prevent death by disease and other causes. Finally, they would observe that we spend paltry sums for population planning, even though its spontaneous growth is an urgent threat to life on our planet. Our visitors from outer space could be forgiven if they reported home that our planet is inhabited by a race of insane men whose future is bleak and uncertain. Remember last night when we were reading Margaret Sanger talking about the birth of a new race? Remember Nazism built on the birth of a new race. Remember the Democrat Party looking for the birth of a new nation. Something about a birth is always important to them, but certainly not the birth of children. Family plan.
Don't forget the birth of a new nation was what the KKK was all about.
Exactly. Certainly was. There is no human circumstance more tragic than the persisting existence of a harmful condition for which a remedy is readily available. Yeah, you have a condition, you're not pregnant. Family planning to relate population to world resources is possible, practical, and necessary. I want to read that to you again because it relates to rare, safe, legal, safe, and rare. Family planning is possible, practical, and necessary. Unlike plagues of the Dark Ages or contemporary diseases we do not yet understand, the modern plague of overpopulation is soluble by means we have discovered and with resources we possess. What is lacking is not sufficient knowledge of the solution, but universal consciousness of the gravity of the problem and education of the billions who are its victims. It is easier for a Negro to understand a social paradox because he has lived so long with evils that could be eradicated, but were perpetuated by indifference or ignorance. The Negro finally had to devise unique methods to deal with his problem, and perhaps the measure of success he is realizing can be an inspiration to others coping with tenacious social problems. So literally, for us to cope with racism in America, we got to kill our own. In our struggle for equality, we were confronted with the reality that many millions of people were essentially ignorant of our conditions or refused to face unpleasant truths. The hardcore bigot was merely one of our adversaries. The millions who were blind to our plight had to be compelled to face the social evil their indifference permitted to flourish. After centuries of relative silence and enforced acceptance, we adapted a technique of exposing the problem by direct and dramatic methods. We had confidence that when we awakened the nation to the immorality and evil of an inequality, there would be an upsurge of conscience, followed by remedial action. We knew that there were solutions and that the majority of the nation were ready for them. Yet we also knew that the existence of solutions would not automatically operate to alter conditions. We had to organize not only arguments, but people in the millions for action. Social justice, social organization, social. Doesn't that remind you of Karl Marx? Finally, we had to be prepared to accept all the consequences involved in dramatizing our grievances in the unique style we had devised. There is striking kinship between our movement and Margaret Sanger's early efforts. I want to put that in our chat roll for you to understand. Coretta Scott King reading Dr. King's speech makes the transition. This is why you'll have black people that will stand up and tell you that homosexuality and gay marriage are equal to the color of one's skin. Because these assertions were made about Planned Parenthood as well. She goes on to say, she, like we, saw the horrifying conditions of ghetto life. Like we, she knew that all of society is poisoned by cancerous slums. Like we, she was a direct actionist, a nonviolent resistor. She was willing to accept scorn and abuse until the truth she saw was revealed to the millions. At the turn of the century, she went into the slums and set up a birth control clinic, an abortion center, baby. And Dr. King wrote it, Mrs. King reading it. And for this deed, she went to jail because she was violating an unjust law. Yet the years have justified her actions. She launched a movement which is obeying a higher law to preserve human life under humane conditions. So if you cannot afford your baby, you're being inhumane. Margaret Sanger had to commit what was then called a crime in order to enrich humanity. And today we honor her courage and vision. For without them, there would have been no beginning. Our sure beginning in the struggle for equality by nonviolent direct action may not have been so resolute without the tradition established by Margaret Sanger. Wow. And people like her. Negroes have no mere academic nor ordinary interest in family planning. They have a special and urgent concern. Recently, the subject of Negro family life has received extensive attention. Unfortunately, studies have overemphasized the problem of the Negro male ego and almost entirely ignored the most serious element, Negro migration. During the past half century, Negroes have migrated on a massive scale, transplanting millions from rural communities to crammed urban ghettos. In their migration, as with all migrants, immigration, they carried with them the folkways of the countryside into an inhospitable city slum. The size of a family that may have been appropriate and tolerable on a manually cultivated farm was carried over to the jammed streets of the ghetto. In all respects, Negroes were atomized, neglected, and discriminated against. Yet the worst omission was the absence of institutions to acclimate them to their new environment. This is really sad. Margaret Sanger, who offered an important institutional remedy, was unfortunately ignored by social and political leaders in this period. In consequence, Negro folkways and family size persisted. The problem was compounded when unrestrained exploitation and discrimination ascended the bewilderment of the newcomer, and high rates of illegitimacy and fragile family relationships resulted. For the Negro, therefore, intelligent guides of family planning are a profoundly important ingredient in his quest for security and a decent life. It's all about self. There are mountainous obstacles still separating Negroes from a normal existence. Yet one element in stabilizing his life would be an understanding of and easy access to the means to develop a family related in size to his community environment and to the income potential he can command. If you can't afford the baby, abort it, is what Dr. King's writing here. This is not to suggest that the Negro will solve all his problems through Planned Parenthood. You see, if you survive the womb, you still have to deal with the racism of the white man, is what just wanted to make that clear to y'all. His problems are far more complex, encompassing economic security, education, freedom from discrimination, decent housing, and access to culture. Yet if family planning is sensible, it can facilitate or at least not be an obstacle to the solution of many profound problems that plague him. The Negro constitutes half the poor of the nation. Like all poor, Negro and white, they have many unwanted children. This is Dr. Martin Luther King, the I Say I Have a Dream Dr. King. I'm reading this paragraph to you You will probably have a new way of looking at Dr. King after this paragraph. Like all poor, Negro and white, they have many unwanted children. This is a cruel evil they urgently need to control. There is scarcely anything more tragic in human life than a child who is not wanted. That which should be a blessing becomes a curse for parent and child. There is nothing inherent in the Negro mentality which creates this condition. Their poverty causes it. When Negroes have been able to ascend economically, statistics reveal they plan their families with greater care than whites. Negroes, see, it's a racism thing. Negroes of higher economic and educational status actually have fewer children than white families in the same circumstances. Some commentators point out that with present birth weights, it will not be long before Negroes are a majority in many of the major cities of the nation. As a consequence, they can be expected to take political control. See, Dr. King is expressing a fear-mongering here. They will take political control, and many people are apprehensive at this prospect. Negroes do not seek political control by this means. They seek only what they are entitled to, and do not wish for domination purchased at the cost of human misery. Negroes were once bred by slave owners to be sold as merchandise. They do not welcome any solution which involves population breeding as a weapon. They are instinctively sympathetic to all who offer methods that would improve their lives and offer them fair opportunity to develop and advance as all other people in our society. For these reasons, we are natural allies of those who seek to inject any form of planning in our society that enriches life and guarantees the right to exist in freedom and dignity. For these constructive movements, we are prepared to give our energies and consistent support. And please, don't be so naive as to send me an email or a Facebook message and say, well, Dr. King didn't know what Planned Parenthood was all about. He won a Nobel Prize. He ain't ignorant. Because in the need for family planning, Negro and white have a common bond, and together we can and should unite our strength for the wise preservation, not of races in general, but of the one race we all constitute, the human race. May 5th, 1966, he received the Margaret Sanger Award via Coretta Scott King, who delivered the speech. Dr. Jones, did you ever hear that speech?
Sure.
Did you ever hear that speech?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's why I used to say that I had a dream that any child that can survive, could survive their time in the womb to be judged by the content of their character and the color of their skin. And I used to get yelled at a lot for that.
Yeah.
And they would tell me that there was no way King would support abortion and stuff because he was a preacher. But he was one of those that were convinced by Margaret Sanger at all. I believe that they didn't go to Martin Luther King with a moral argument, but an economical one.
Yeah.
And that at this time there were a lot of people who did not understand what abortion was, and they truly believed the message from Planned Parenthood that it was unviable tissue mix, that it was just a collection of cells, that were being scraped out of a mom's womb. Of course, now with the advent of science, we know that there's eyeballs and feet and hands, and they're sucking their thumb, and they have a heartbeat after 6 weeks. So we know it's actually a tiny little human in there that's being killed. But at the time, you have to give some benefit of the doubt to some people that maybe they actually thought it was just, remember in biology we used to be told, cell divided itself into 4 and then 8, 16, etc.
Yeah.
And I think that's what everybody kind of had in their head was what was being aborted were just these cells that were clinging to the uterine wall. But now we know better.
Yeah.
And I think Martin Luther King, I'm not trying to defend him, but perhaps he was looking at this economically that and it's true, no matter what your skin color, education you have, the fewer children you have. The more money you make, the fewer children you have. And, you know, but consequently, the fewer children you have, you tend to make more money. So,
Yeah.
and you have time for school, you know, so, I mean, who knows? But that's that way throughout history. The people of the higher classes tend to have fewer children, and the people of the lower classes tend to have more, mostly because they have children out of recreation instead of procreation.
Exactly.
And the wealthier and educated classes do it strictly out of procreation, typically, and it's very planned. But, you know, I've told stories before about how black fathers after the Civil War, when they got their freedom, would walk barefoot across entire states to go find their families, to find their children and their wives that were, you know, separated, sold by their Democrat slave owners, and that they would want to go and reclaim their families.
Mm-hmm.
Tell that parent that did that abortion is a viable thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, the blacks were very family oriented during slavery, and you know, as much as possible, we've learned that slave owners actually tried to keep families intact for the most part because it helped control slaves. If they had their family there, they had something to lose. They had something to protect, and so they were more docile.
Exactly.
And
now,
but, you know, if you watch the history is being miscategorized off and on that, but it did happen.
Exactly.
But
now,
you know,
now
we have go ahead.
Well, because I want to bring this point across, and a lot of people are afraid to critique Dr. Martin Luther King because of the imagery, because of the myth
Right.
and the mystique and the legend. And if you hate on, quote unquote, I'm doing the air quote thing here, if you hate on Dr. King, then you're a racist.
For sure.
But
you can't admit that he was a human being that had some things. I mean,
yes,
he's just like everybody else. You know, he had his good deals and his bad deals, and you've got to learn to take it all together as one package. Overall, he did more good than bad, I would think.
Yeah, exactly. But in this one particular area, and there were a number of other areas where he was tending towards redistribution of wealth, communism. And so many people, as I was growing up, told me that the FBI was lying about Dr. Martin Luther King. Yet as I grew older and did more research, I'm beginning to find out that maybe the FBI wasn't so off base.
Right.
So this is Dr. Elvita King, and this is to let you know that as much as the mystique, the legend, and the myth of the power and the grace and the prominence of Dr. King, we have to be earnest. Martin Luther King Sr., who was his daddy, who was called Daddy King, of course, had a relationship with Elvita King in which he loved her like a daughter. And I'm going to read what Dr. Elvita King writes so that you understand that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. understood what birth control was. He was a graduate from Boston University with a sociology degree. I'm quite certain they talked about abortion and Planned Parenthood at the university. But at Priest for Life, she writes, "My mother was not only angry in 1950, she was pregnant and scared, seeking a DNC. Thank God my granddaddy, Dr. Martin Luther King Sr., had seen me in a dream in 1947, and he was looking and waiting for me. Granddaddy and daddy promised to help mother through that first unexpected pregnancy. I was born to A.D. and Naomi Ruth Barbara King on January 22nd, 1951. Over the years, mother recovered from her anger, finding grace in Jesus Christ. If my family had followed the abortion-friendly path prescribed below, I and my siblings may never have been born." Feminist theologian Christy, and I want you all to understand, black theologians, black liberation theology, and feminist theology, this stuff was being born and bred and just being installed as a disease into the black culture. Feminist theologian Christine Holmgren writes at the Huffington Post, if you were born before women had access to safe, affordable, accessible abortion, chances are your mother was an angry mother. She argues that the use of abortion and contraception can eliminate angry mothers and concludes, this Mother's Day, I challenge American women to renew their commitment to responsible, thoughtful motherhood. Let's protect our liberties, reclaim safe, accessible abortion and contraception as our birthright. This year, let us commit to a new future and a new promise. No more angry mothers. She goes on to write, during the years of my life, I made some scared and angry decisions, including having 2 of what were pitched to me as safe, legal, and rare abortions. And I must admit publicly, not in castination of Dr. Alveda King, we actually share that. In my life, I've actually participated in 2 abortions as well. We are flawed people, and I've already asked God for forgiveness of my sins and my transgressions. Those abortions cost me 3 lives, including my subsequent miscarriage. Be angry and sin not. Anger is one thing. Dead babies are quite another thing altogether. Over the years, I have come to understand that I never needed those abortions and miscarriage. I needed help. Granddaddy Martin Luther King Sr. rescued me again in 1975. He and my son's father promised to help me if I wouldn't abort my next baby. I believed them. Thank God. Planned Parenthood and the entire abortion industry are wrong. Abortion is not a civil right. A woman has a right to choose what she does with her body. The baby is not her body. Please believe me, abortion and harmful contraceptives are dream killers. Abortion doesn't cure anger. Abortion brings death and anguish. If we really want to help angry mothers and their children, we must offer them love, not abortion. They knew the difference. One chose to do what was right. The other encouraged an entire generation. And upon him, and even myself, 55 million babies dead. Ladies and gentlemen, in order for us to restore our nation, there's some moral things that we need to look at that they're not going to talk about during the debates. One of those is life, the other is liberty, and the other pursuit of happiness. You're listening to New Day Black and Red on WNJC 1360 AM out of the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, PA, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and the New Jersey, where Krispy Kreme lives and governs, except during snowstorms when he has to be in New Hampshire, and of course Delaware, where Joe Biden lives, of course, on the weekends. Professor.
Yes.
Abortion. 50,
no, thank you.
I agree with you. 55 million babies. And now Hillary Clinton, which I will be getting into next week. We'll start it off tonight. But Hillary Clinton adores Margaret Sanger, and she adores Saul Alinsky.
Sure.
Why is it that Democrats have an affinity for abortion, and why is it that Republicans are afraid to chastise them?
Well, abortion brings a lot of money and political power. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's why Democrats support it, because Republicans have been fighting it for the right to life, aspects and religious aspects. And the people who gravitate to the Democrat Party are usually anti-Christian or of a Christian that I don't think Christ would recognize. And the power that they have that comes from this is phenomenal. The amount of donations. The DNC spends a lot of money giving to Planned Parenthood. And Planned Parenthood spends a lot of money giving it back to individual Democrat candidates as well.
Yeah.
And they do it through other networks, not just them, but I can't think of the name of it now, the Angie's List or whatever that is, and other organizations. Republicans are afraid to do it, to attack it, because they believe that the majority of Americans are for abortion. They believe that myth. I don't believe that's true. I think the majority of people are against it. What they should be doing, and what they fail to do on almost every situation, is to educate the public of what's really going on.
Yeah.
You know, when the left will fight to prevent a woman from having a ultrasound before she has an abortion, so that the mom, because they're afraid that if the mom sees what she's actually getting rid of, she won't do it. And then they lose power. They lose money. But now abortion is big money. Trust me. They don't need our subsidies from government. Those are only done, you know, for political purposes, not because Planned Parenthood can't function without it. If you have to defend against that you don't want a mother to see what she's actually aborting because it will change her mind, then you're on the wrong side. And the Republican Party fails to educate potential voters on truth, on what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's happening is most of this is being staged by the media, because that's where people go to find out about political things like this. And for the most part, that media portrays anybody that's against abortion as being a right-wing zealot religious nut, and that they want to control you and control your body. And of course, you know, when they can couch it like that a woman, it's her body, it's her right. Well, maybe. But we don't let women be prostitutes, and that's their body. You know, why can't they go out and make some bucks with them? They can kill a baby in themselves, but they can't make a little bit of bucks having fun.
Exactly.
We don't let them do heroin, and it's their body. We don't let them do cocaine, and it's their body. We don't let them smoke cigarettes, God help us, especially when they're pregnant, or drink alcohol. We get pissed off at them for that.
Yeah.
And, you know, and remember, you know, some of them actually have gone to jail for fetal alcohol syndrome and stuff that they've, you know, given their babies. So it's not really their body, is it? I mean, if we've clearly got plenty of laws that control women's bodies. So that's not even right. But it's not their body at all. It's a individual, another life that's inside their body. It's not it's not a part of their body. It is simply in their body growing.
Exactly.
And that's the way God designed us. You know, so it's not like man forced women into this. This is just what women's role is. They have the babies.
Exactly.
And right. So this is a natural function, and it's the way we propagate the species. Now, we also are led to believe that women have no power to say no to sex with people, that they have to have the sex, and therefore they have to get pregnant. You know, and there's plenty of ways of preventing children from being born prior to an abortion. You know, you've got the pill, and you've got condoms, and you've got rhythm, and you've got Norplant, you've got all kinds of things, and you've got your legs, which you can simply cross and prevent pregnancy. But, you know, or my grandma used to tell me that when she grew up, her mother gave her an aspirin and told her to put it between her knees. That would keep her from getting pregnant. And, you know, and so she did, you know, because as long as you're holding that aspirin between your knees, nothing's getting in. And so it worked.
But here's what here's what the those on the left say. That abortion is supposed to be legal, safe, and rare. In fact, that was the quote of President William Jefferson Clinton, Bill Clinton.
Exactly. Well, that was just a propaganda line.
Mm-hmm.
That was to make the Republicans think, or right to lifers think, okay, we're going to start reducing. That was the goal for them. And they thought, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make it safer, because a lot of women die in abortions too.
Yes.
You know, it's not, they run around and give you all these stats of how many women died from using Coca-Cola or hangers. But a lot of women still die from the abortion process. And in Texas, we've been cleaning up these places. You know, I mean, it wasn't too many months ago, Ken, it was a national disgrace about these women. I think it was up in New York or somewhere, where they had a front door for white people and a back door for black women to go in to have abortions. Remember that?
Yeah.
And that the white section was clean and it looked like any kind of hospital, but the black, the minority section was, you know, had blood everywhere and fetal tissue laying around. It was disgusting and non-hygienic and stuff. Okay. Well, that's because the minorities are going to go there and they're not going to complain for fear of losing this. But white people, if they saw that, they would protest and they would throw a fit, and this whole system would get shut down.
Exactly.
That's the argument about why they did that. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the argument that the left gave of why they found that way. But the simple fact is you're killing a life, and it's only because it's an inconvenience.
Yeah.
You know, and you had a chance to not have it made, but now that it's there, now you've got a duty. And, you know, almost every woman I've ever talked to or heard talk about that was going to have an abortion and then went ahead and have a kid were grateful for it. Every mother that had an abortion but their child lived ended up being grateful for it. Not only was the kid grateful they lived, but the mother was grateful for it, for living. And and look at these parents that have Down syndrome kids. The vast majority of them talk about what a blessing their child is, even though it's a burden and it takes a lot of their money and time, and it was never what they had wanted. You know, they wanted a healthy 10-toe, fingered kid that laugh and play and be a normal person, but even them they call angels and blessings and whatnot, and that's because they are.
Exactly. Ladies and gentlemen.
And it just blows my mind, Ken, that we could so conveniently euphemize this thing away as something for convenience.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we were talking about Karl Marx and the political weapons that he used, warfare, being the media, the pulpit, and satire, or comical papers as we know them. He knew them in his day. But we've, in continuance of a series that I've been doing on my program and preparing for serious debate, the issues as we see them in our community, and talking about W.B. Du Bois and Margaret Sanger and the connectivity of ideology over life, and how easy it is to choose your ideology over life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We divulged our conversation into the area of abortion. Now, there have been 55 million abortions since Roe v. Wade, 1973. The right of the father regarding his sperm has literally been rejected by the Supreme Court, and the onus is on the woman. And many women go through that, and I tell you right now, to this day, as a man, I regret sincerely and deeply that I participated in 2 abortions. I wish I could see my children. And women share that same thought as well. I want to go over, because I have this opportunity. It is said that about 20 weeks past fertilization that a baby feels pain. Anatomically,
6 weeks.
Yeah.
6 weeks, kid.
Yeah, it's 6 weeks, but the left wants you to know it's 20. Pain receptors are present throughout the unborn child's entire body by no later than 16 weeks after fertilization. We know it to be 6 weeks. So, as a result, unborn babies feel pain more intensely than adults. Behaviorally, by 8 weeks after fertilization, the unborn child reacts to touch. So literally, the child is recoiling in the mother's womb. Surgeons entering the womb to perform corrective procedures on unborn children have seen these babies flinch, jerk, and recoil from sharp objects and incisions. They are reactive at that age to the stimuli of sound, light, and touch. Physiologically, the application of painful stimuli is associated with significant increases in the unborn child's stress hormones. During fetal surgery, anesthesia is routinely administered to the unborn baby and is associated with a decrease in stress hormones compared to their level when painful stimuli are applied. During a D&E, sharp-edged instruments are used to grasp, twist, and tear the baby's body into pieces. This continues until the child's entire body is removed from the womb. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Kennedy describes the procedure saying the fetus in many cases dies just as a human adult or child would. It bleeds to death as it is torn limb from limb. Digoxin abortion. A drug called digoxin is injected directly into the baby's heart, giving the fetus a fatal heart attack. The dead baby is then removed from his or her mother by dismemberment. Ladies and gentlemen, children feel pain. I would like to do a show someday and tell you that children don't, but they do. What's worse is the adult who feels pain. This is a young woman who anonymously wrote to a website regarding abortion. Pardon me. She said, "It's been just over a year since my abortion, and believe it or not, I was only 16 at the time. Before the doctor told me, I already knew I was pregnant. My boyfriend, whom I had been dating for about 3 months, has a daughter already from a previous relationship, so when I told him that I was pregnant, he totally neglected the fact and acted like what I had just told him meant nothing. His ex-girlfriend kept the baby as a threat to keep them together. So when I told him I was pregnant, he couldn't handle it, especially being 19 with one kid and one on the way. By the time my abortion appointment came around, I was about 3 months pregnant. And of course, being young and stupid, I thought, who cares? It's not murder. And was I wrong? When I went to the hospital to get the procedure done, all the doctors treated me like crap, stared me down. None of them would even speak to me. They were just there to get the job done and didn't care about your feelings. They sent me into a room where I was put on an operation table. 2 doctors, 2 nurses, and me. They didn't talk to me at all. I had never felt so disgusted in my life. I hated myself. The procedure took about 20 minutes, then I was taken back to the recovery room where my 2 best friends were waiting. I was put under anesthetic, so when I finally came to, I had no control over myself. I woke up bawling my eyes out, calling for my friends. It was the worst feeling ever. The thing is, I had been pro-choice for a long time, even after my abortion. I kept saying to myself, I had to. I was too young. I wasn't ready. But let me tell you, you think the emotional pain is bad right after. The long-term pain is worse. I can concur with that. Every day that has passed has turned me from pro-choice to pro-life. My child would have looked like its hair color, yeah, probably, its eyes, and it kills me, especially when I need comfort and my friends say I could imagine what it feels like to have one done. And some don't see what the big deal is. They will never understand what it feels like to wake up every morning with it in your mind, feeling disgusted and ashamed of yourself, the guilt, the pain, the regret. Every time I see a baby, I stare at them and I can't help it. I feel so bad and I wonder what my life would have been like. So for anyone who is considering an abortion, just remember that all of us are ordinary people like you. We all write about our stories so that you can learn from our mistakes and save yourself from the shame that we feel. So please, reconsider. At least think about adoption, because living your life in shame and regret is not the way to live. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I know I talk about the 17th Amendment. Changing that will put us back in a right fashion, going in the right direction. But the truth of the matter is, we are an egregious people. We murder our babies. It is murder. We do it for the convenience. We do it because we don't want to have to deal with the circumstances of our one-night stands and our pleasurable situations. We don't want those things to change. We want to have it all and nothing at all. 55 million babies have died in America. And now we have gotten to a point where people on a dais at podiums won't even talk about abortion because it's the law of the land. Murder is the law of the land. And then there are those in the District of Columbia that now want to pass a sweeping criminal bill so that they would pay murderers not to murder. And I'm not talking about abortion. I'm talking about where we are as a nation. We kill our own. We take away liberties and freedoms. We take away life. And then we want to elect people who will help us pursue our happiness. But what joy is there when we look back and we see all the crosses that we bear, and we regret that the one thing that the founding fathers wanted us to have most and that Jesus died for was an abundant life. And we sacrifice the abundance so that we might have our own selfish life. Ladies and gentlemen, I know New Day Black and Red normally doesn't end with a commentary like this, but I'm so moved in the spirit in this particular moment, because there's a man out there, there's a woman out there, there's a boy out there, there's a girl out there, someone who was in my predicament, my situation, my circumstance. And I'm going to tell you, there is no greater selfishness than to take the life of an unborn child. In fact, a child is conceived and thus it's born. That we interfere with this pathway is to align ourselves with the ideology of Margaret Sanger, W.E.B. Du Bois, Dr. Martin Luther King, Coretta Scott King, Mary Church Terrell, and the Ku Klux Klan. You see, we can easily blame the white cop for killing our black thug child. And we can blame it on racism and be justified in the court of public opinion. But the truth of the matter is, in the court of Jesus Christ, to lose a child is the greatest misery and pain of all. And to choose that misery because 7 justices say you have the right to, is the greatest injustice in human history. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so much for listening to New Day Black and Red. We'll be back next Saturday, 5 p.m. on WNJC 1360 AM. My very great friend once told me, never die cowardly, sir. Always live bravely. I promise you I always will. Remember always, God bless America. Now it's time for America to bless God. Good night, and God bless. Good night, sir.
Oops. Did you say good night?
Good night, sir. Yes.
I apologize. I think I fell asleep again.
That's okay. That's all right. So does the rest of the world who was listening. Thank you very much.
Hey, you know, my mother had 6 miscarriages, and I was the second one. I was born. There was a miscarriage, and then me, and then 5 after me, and it was rough, you know, to see what they went through and everything. And my heart goes out to her and anybody that has miscarriages, but that's, you know, what an abortion is. So it's one done on purpose.
Yeah.
You know what DMC is, that chemical abortion they do?
Yeah.
Where they go in there and they scrape the lining and everything. But you notice that's the same initials as the Democrat National Committee?
Yeah.
Coincidence? I think not.
It's not. It's not at all.
Because that's what they do to the Constitution. It's chemical abortion.
Exactly.
Are we still on the air?
We are still on the air, sir. But but it's good. I'm telling you, man. There's so many things we have to worry about in terms of techno abortions now, chemical abortions, medicinal abortions, surgical abortions. We've turned it into an industry.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Wonder they can get Lamborghinis and stuff. I mean, that's incredible.
Exactly.
Someone sent me a picture of Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin in hell, and the devil's in the background reading a newspaper about selling body parts at Planned Parenthood. And Hitler looks over and goes, "Who knew? All we had to do was sell the body parts, and we got away with it." Yeah,
wow. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. All right, sir. I will talk with you tomorrow. God bless you, man.
Require you to return my phone call.
I shall return your phone call, sir. Thank you. God bless, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's always been fun. I look forward to this.
Likewise, man. I really enjoy this.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.